As Dr. D here. Today I'm going to be talking about synthesizers, the practical application of some of these elements of a analog synthesizer in FM synthesis. So at this point, hopefully you've watched some of the content and videos talking about what synthesis is. Now I'm going to get into talking about the practical stuff about synthesis, like oscillators and how we combine oscillators to generate new tones, new timbres of sounds. Also, I'm going to talk about filters and how we can use EQ filters like high pass and low pass filters to trim out the high end and the low end and combine these sounds together to form complex new timbres and tones, as well as how we can shape the sound in terms of the envelope. So we'll be talking about envelopes and the practical application of those within the synthesizers that we find on Logic and Ableton. All right, so here we go. I'm going to pull up Ableton Live first, and let me minimize my window here for you. Okay, so what I have here is I have Operator open on Ableton Live, and operators are really simple, kind of straightforward, easy to use synth. I think it is, at least. And what we're looking at is on the left side of the operator, there are 4 different panes here. These are like little window panes here, but these are different oscillators. Okay. When we click from pane to pane, you can notice that this window has various elements that might be changing. Okay, so on each of these panes, each of these are oscillators, and right now I have the A oscillator set to be a sine wave. I have the B one set to be a saw wave, and then a square wave on the third one, the C. And then the D, I have a noise, white noise oscillator. Oscillators are like different waveforms that give you different timbres of sound. Now, the level here, if I go ahead and play my MIDI keyboard, you can hear the sound of the sine wave only. Each of these panes for the oscillators have a level, which I can turn up or turn down to mix together these different oscillators. There's also tuning capabilities. So coarse and fine are going to pitch up or down the oscillator's tone. So right now we have this sine wave. When I change the coarse setting, it goes up an octave, and then these are various overtones. It's like an octave and a fifth, and etc., etc. I don't have it offhand memorized, but these are the different, overtone ranges, and you can go high to low. And in the fine one, it's a smaller increment of pitch shifting. So I can go up an octave, but sort of in like increments less than a semitone or a quarter step. Okay, so that's what's going on with each of these. And what I can do to shape different sounds is I can set my second oscillator to be like a saw wave. And as I turn up the level, you can hear that buzzy aspect of the saw wave coming in to the sine wave, which is just kind of a pure, clean, even tone. Now when I turn up the, I've got my square wave there. Nothing's happening for some reason. Oh, there it is. Okay. One tricky thing about oscillator that I just noticed again was that these have to be in order. Over here on the far bottom left side, you see this section here, this pane over here. These are different. This is the routing of those oscillators. One feeds into the next. So A feeds into B, feeds into C, feeds into D. And I can shape these sounds, the timbre of the sound, by mixing together and pitching, combining these different oscillators with their pitch settings and the level of the signal that's being fed one into the next. It gives you that complex tone. When I click back down on here on this window pane, you notice I have several different choices of routing. I can route A into B and then branch B into C and D, or I can do any number of different combinations. So it's basically the signal routing of one oscillator into the next. And these different configurations will give you different tones. But one of the things that was happening just a second ago is because this is all in a line here. These are all kind of in series. If this one is turned all the way down, I don't hear the one that comes with it after it's C. Okay, so I can turn these off or on and combine those all within this left portion of the window pane for operator. Now in the center, I have other control characteristics. You notice there is a envelope and a oscillator. Okay, so this is kind of like a view of the oscillator's shape. It's a saw D wave, which is a saw wave is, you know, it kind of looks like serrated edges. The envelope does, or not the envelope, but the actual waveform has kind of a texture to it. You'll see that on different diagrams that show what an oscillator looks like. But the one I want to point out is the envelope. Okay, so the sound envelope is kind of like the shape of the sound. Different sounds from different instruments have different characteristics depending on how you play them. Like a guitar, you would pluck the note of the guitar. I've got one behind me. What the heck? And it goes like this. And there's a quick attack, and then the note kind of resonates for a little while before it dies. So that sound wave, which you've probably seen diagrams for in previous exercises for this class or its prerequisites, those different like quick attack or long attack, that's going to shape the sound of the sound and make it sound characteristically like an instrument, like a string instrument or a bowed string instrument, as opposed to a plucked string instrument, or a organ compared to a piano. And the attack, decay, sustain, release, those are the physical characteristics of that sound's envelope. Okay, so as I mess with these, if I choose to just have one oscillator on or maybe two oscillators on, I've got that annoying sound. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay, so when I mess with the oscillator on the A oscillator, which is the sine wave, and I change the shape of this sound envelope up here, I can manipulate the attack, decay, sustain, and release, which you kind of see here in number settings in milliseconds. But I can get kind of an easing into the note by lowering the attack or lengthening the attack time, and the note kind of slowly swells. I can also have a quick decay, and that's going to give it kind of a sharper plucked sound. When the note happens, the sound, you know, ramps up real quick and then dies down real quick, which kind of sounds like a plucked instrument, or a bowed instrument that might have like a slow attack and long sustain and decay. Maybe I do this. Okay, so by manipulating the attack, decay, sustain, and release, either down here in these number areas where you can change the number value and move it up and down, you can also shape it here, which gives you a nice sort of physical, visual representation of that. So each of these individual oscillators have their own envelope. So if we think about the complexity of having 3 or 4 different timbres and tones of oscillators going on top of one another and then changing the shape of the envelope. So for instance, maybe I have a very quick attack and shorter release on the buzzy aspect of my sound, and then my sine wave, my smooth, clean, clear toning sound, I can add like a little pluck to that by changing my buzzy sounds envelope to happen like right away. So you kind of get the idea. You want to play around with these and oh, they're sustained. There we go. There we go. So anyway, you get the idea. You play with these things and you can develop all kinds of different interesting sounds and mimic the sounds of actual real instruments. Okay, so moving on through here, there's the LFO section. LFO stands for low frequency oscillator, and that's going to basically, there's going to be a wave that swings around in some form, whether it's a sine wave, a square wave, or a triangle wave, etc. And it's going to basically pitch, because these two, this is like a modulator frequency that causes the pitch of the other frequency to swing up and down. So you can kind of hear an example of that here. So my rate, if I slow it down, and I change it to a sine wave maybe, you can hear it swings. And that's kind of a weird non-musical thing to happen, but if you increase the rate drastically, you get kind of like a distorted effect. That's kind of what a distortion pedal does anyway. It's just kind of like almost like a square wave at a high rate of oscillation. That gives it that bite. You can kind of change the amount of the oscillator and how much it affects the sound. Okay, so on top of that, there's the filter. I can activate that here. These are just EQs. High pass, or this is low pass filter, high pass filter, sort of like a notch filter. But yeah, if I want to filter out some of the low end of this sound because it's too gritty down low. There we go. Oh, frequency was way too high. So that's what that can do. Resonance there. And whether I want a 12 octave or 24 octave, or maybe that's decibels, 12 decibel or 24 decibel boost or cut there. Okay, and then there's the pitch. This is kind of like a slide into a note, or slide from lower into a note, or slide from above into the note. So we'll give you an example. You can hear it kind of dives from above, or coming from below. So you can change the elements of that. You can get it spread stereo. You can transpose it. All kinds of craziness going on with that. Okay, cool. And then down here, of course, you have your kind of master control. So it's sort of like signal flows up through the different oscillators here, and then you have on the back side of the device, you have an LFO, a filter, as well as pitch bending glides into a note, as well as some of the master controls where you can change the tone of the overall sound of the instrument and volume of it, as well as the routing through the different strings of signal going into the next. Okay, cool. Now switching gears, we're going to show you some stuff on Logic here. We're going to work between these two programs quite a bit, so I'm going to bring up some Logic, but first mute my Ableton. Okay, let's get some. Alright, so what we're looking at here, this is the ES2. This is the basic synthesizer that's comparable to the one I was showing you in Ableton just a moment ago. This is kind of its equivalent. It's a very straightforward, synthesizer where you can use multiple different oscillators simultaneously and feed those into each other to create your own unique sounds. Okay, so with this one, what we have going on here is there are essentially 3 different oscillators going on at the top, and you can see these settings for sine waves, saw waves. This is a saw wave, a sine wave. No, that's a square wave. There's your sawtooth wave, and then your triangle wave. Now each of these can be activated or deactivated by clicking on the number. So I'll start with just the sine wave and play some of this so you can hear it. Oops, I'm going to need to arm my track once again. Where's my Windows? Come on now. There it is. Okay. Alright, so now I'm on the right device. This here is your sine wave, square waves, sawtooth wave, triangle wave. Okay, they each have a pitch change where you can change the semitones or cents. So up and down you can pitch these together. There's like a triangle situation here where I can combine up to 3 different oscillators, and I can change them to be different sounds and signals. You know, I can have a sine wave up there, I can have a square wave here, maybe a sawtooth right there, and I can get all 3. And I can pitch one or the other one up. Now I can also change which of these 3 is dominating. So this is like a triangle where you can combine these 3 different oscillators. So if you're up here in this corner, it's all sine. You're over here, it's all square. Down here, it's all sawtooth. Out of tune sawtooth. So you can find a nice little place there for all that stuff. Okay, so in terms of filter, we have this filter control here in the middle. You can disable it or you can enable it, and you have a cut, which is going to cut the high frequencies, also known as a low pass filter right here. And you can change some of these signals. Not quite sure what to call that, but it's what it does. It changes the kind of filters out, automatically filters out lows and highs and whatnot. Okay. Resonance thing there, which doesn't quite, there it goes. Oh, it's like resonance, like weird feedback sounds in the upper registers. And then drive, which kind of makes it more gritty. Okay. Yeah, there's a second filter as well that you can kind of blend together. So obviously this is all set to have that timbre and filtering of frequencies, and then this one over here is nothing going on. So we'd have to go ahead and work with that, but it's a filter on the second half that you can kind of blend one into the other. All right, sweet. So over here we've got some effects, like you can change the tone of the sound, make it darker, warmer, add some distortion. Here's the overall volume or gain of that. Other effects, add flanger and chorus or phaser to it. Woo, space. Okay, cool. Now the other really important aspect of using this particular synthesizer is the envelope. Now over in Ableton world, we were using a kind of a visual adzer, attack, decay, sustain, release looking graph format. We don't really have that here in Logic's ES2, but what we do have is pretty simple knobs down here at the bottom. So if you understand attack, decay, sustain, release, you can take that tone, take this synth sound, and you can, you know, make the attack time very, let's see, very short or longer of an attack time. So it swells in. Decay can be very quick. You can have some more sustain. Release, you can have it kind of swell on for a while. There you go. Get a very quick release where it kind of cuts off. And then you have volume. Some more, controls down here that do. You can alter different parameters up at the top, kind of globally down here, detuning it and changing the waveform as well as changing the cutoff frequencies, almost like high pass, low pass filters. Okay, so that's a quick practical run through of these two synthesizers, and you will pick one of which to do your project, or is actually a homework assignment. But in that homework assignment, you guys are going to basically create a mimic, synthesize real instrument sounds like a trumpet and a violin. I think a bass is in there, and then something else. Oh yeah, a mallet instrument. So you guys are going to try to figure out how to mimic these sounds and use these analog synthesizers, either the ES2 or the operator in Ableton, to complete that assignment. So that's a little talk on synthesis and oscillators and filters and envelopes to generate your own custom synth sounds with an analog synthesizer. All right, this has been fun. Follow, like, subscribe, whatever. We'll see you in another class.